Hey friends, thanks for joining me, Jim Baroud, to hear a few insights from leaders who represent our innovation ecosystem. Today's chat is with Dr. Stephen Klasko, Executive in Residence at General Catalyst, and the former President and CEO of Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health.
I spent most of my career running nonprofit, either health systems and or academic entities as a dean, as a president, and most recently as the president and CEO of Thomas Jefferson University and Jefferson Health. I spent the first part of my career, I really wanted to make an impact around that intersection between sort of the transformational and technology world with the traditional healthcare ecosystem. And really take some of the things that I had written about with Hemant Taneja, who's the CEO of General Catalyst, in our book called On Healthcare, a Manifesto for Health Assurance, and not have it just be a fantasy book, but have it turn into, something that we could do. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is around how do we take population health, social determinants, predictive analytics, and health equity from philosophy to the mainstream. And a few different entities. I'm an executive in residence for General Catalyst, working with several of their companies. The North American Ambassador for Sheba Medical Center, which is the largest health system in Israel, and according to Newsweek, the number 11 health system in the world. I'm an operating partner and chief medical officer for Abundant Venture Partners, so I get to be on the board of Avia, which is one of those very few innovation GPOs. And I'm the lead independent director for a New York Stock Exchange multi-billion-dollar company called Teleflex. So a lot of things going on, and I'm on the board of several companies. And on the nonprofit side, I get to be the chair of the board of Opera Philadelphia. And the arts might be the only thing more difficult to run than healthcare. So I went out of the frying pan and into the fire. And I'm on the board of something called Friedreich's Ataxia Research Alliance, which is a really tough neurologic disease for kids that I've been involved with for a while. So, a lot going on, and people keep saying, boy, everybody asks you to be an advisor. I say, look, if you're 69 years old and you're still vertical, and your first Google page doesn't have anything horrible, by definition, everybody's going to know who you are.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, it seems like you're keeping super busy, and that's super exciting. Just so for people who don't know, General Catalyst is what?
So General Catalyst is now the largest health venture capital entity in the country. It only about 20 or so percent of our pieces is healthcare, but they were Hemant Taneja and his team were some of the initial investors in things like Airbnb, Warby Parker, and Stripe, and he wrote a book called Unscaled. That the new economy, it used to be if you wanted to build a bigger, better hotel chain than Marriott, you had to build a lot of real estate. Airbnb, changed that. Same thing with Warby Parker and glasses, and Stripe with finance. We wrote a book together. We got a chance to become friends, and we wrote a book together called On Healthcare. That the new healthcare is not going to be about building bigger, better hospitals, just like Airbnb wasn't about building bigger, better hotels. It's going to be about connecting people and taking care of those 97% of people that wake up in the morning and don't say, I'm a patient. I want to be a person. They might be a person with diabetes or cancer or congestive heart failure. But how do you take care of those people while they're people? So that's what they've done. They have 147 entities that they've invested in or are part owners of. Their big success was Livongo, which got sold for $18.4 billion to Teladoc. So it's really exciting. I serve as in essence, an executive in residence, which is like an advisor to General Catalyst.
Wow, that's exciting. Okay, so you've done a lot, right? From education to health, well, delivering babies,
Yeah.
and then to education, and also leading hospitals. So tell us more about sort of that journey, right? You've obviously, you are a standout, right, in two fields which are a little stodgy. That's probably an understatement and a kind word. So tell us how you got to where you are now, what that journey was like.
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I did give a talk for Forbes. I think it was like right before I joined Jefferson in 2012 or 2013. And one of the speakers was Austin Goolsbee. Steve Forbes was interviewing Austin. For those of you who don't know, was the head of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. He's an amazing economist and actually pretty funny. But I was billed as sort of a futurist, and I was the second speaker, and he gets up there, talks about the economy in 2012, 2013. But then says there's two things you don't want to be running for the next 10 years because they're just so clueless and they've got to go through cataclysmic change, are academics and healthcare. And I was the next speaker. I said, well, obviously, I'm really lousy as a futurist because I just took a job in Philadelphia in academic healthcare. So according to Austin, like I'm doomed. But he wasn't wrong and he's not wrong. And the only thing that's kept both of those from just being totally decimated are artificial things. And we're starting to see that with the student debt crisis and that kind of thing, that, on academics, it's just because of Pell Grants. And I mean, literally, I mean, you've seen the graphs. I'm sure everybody's seen the graphs where, if you look at inflation over the last 20 years and everything, take the most inflated thing, whether it's gasoline or whatever, and then you look at academics is way off the chart. Healthcare is just a little bit less than that. And academics makes no sense. So the question really becomes, I got my degree at Wharton and my M.B.A, and one could argue that the ROI on that was huge, right? So whatever they charged me, back then it was $80,000. I'm sure it's a lot more now. But, I ran Thomas Jefferson University, and as president, we were a great fashion design university, health system university. We were good business and engineering, but not, not at Columbia levels. But it was like $60,000. My son has a master's in acting from Columbia. It was like $70,000 a year. And he's done fine, but that, like at some point the ROI on that gets really, really hit. And on the hospital side, the only reason we were able to, do what we did is we could keep getting more and more inefficient and then charge the insurers more and more. We said, well, it used to be like, it was, hey, we hired 27 more new administrators and we got 5% more inefficient. So we'd like you to pay us 7% more. And the insurers would say, oh, sure, okay. And then they'd go to the employer and say, well, we're getting hit by the folks, the hospitals. So we have to give them 7% more. So we're going to charge you 10% more. And the employers go, okay, I mean, that just is math that doesn't match. So one of the books I wrote was called We Can't Fix Healthcare. It basically looked at what if everybody that blames everybody else for what's wrong in healthcare, something happened where they had to tell the truth about what was wrong in their sector. And we got all those people together and said, hey, this is what needs to change. So I think that the simple fact is that I can take each one of those, James. We could take from a payer point of view, they can no longer get 17 cents on the dollar to make sure the people that pay for the care get the care and provide the care can't talk to each other. As hospitals, it's going to be about cost, access, quality, and user experience, which has never been about before. With pharma, even what we call things, right? I'm old enough to remember when payers were called insurers. Then they realized, damn, nobody likes insurers, so let's call ourselves payers. Well, they're not payers. The only payers are government, people, and employers. But payers sounds better than insurers. You remember when we used to call the J&Js and the Merck's drug companies. Well, drug companies sounds too much like drug dealers. So we're now pharma. Oh, okay, well, that's all research and everything. And we used to be hospital systems, but that sounds mean and harsh. So now it's, Jefferson Health, USF Health, Penn Health. But what's insane about that is we define where we are by where we fail to keep people healthy, right? We're the only industry. Is it like, I used to have a sign in my thing that says when in my office, when Elon Musk, I hope 5 years from now, when Elon Musk brings people from Mars to Philadelphia and says, where's Jefferson? You can't define that. I mean, Jefferson at home, Jefferson on my phone, but we define our health by we define our health by where everybody's failed. So in essence, it would be like if Apple defined where they are not by Cupertino, but by where they take the refurbished iPhones that didn't work. So I just think that, I think that we need new definitions and we need to get to the point where we're seeing more alignment. That's, by the way, that's why I'm really excited about the Kiesinger thing that got announced. We're Kaiser is, in essence, acquiring Geisinger through this thing called Ryzen. But more importantly, it'll be a nonprofit mega system where they'll bring 14 or 15 hospitals in and give them that sort of skill set of value based from a payer provider alignment perspective, of which Geisinger and Kaiser both are. So, I mean, to me, those are the exciting things that'll start to happen when you start to align some of those things. On the pharma side, I've gone to, the CEOs of pharma, Alex Gorsky from J&J, the former CEO of J&J is a good friend, Ken Frazier, the former CEO of Merck, and they're starting to look at how can we work with large systems to be more solution companies as opposed to just, selling them, the pharma. So I think we're starting to see some positive things in that direction.
That's great. That's great. And talk to some of the things that you did while you were CEO of Jefferson, that sort of shook things up a bit or innovated a bit. And again, hard to do within a stodgy system, but talk to us about some of the wins.
Yeah. So, well, look, I mean, there were wins and there were losses, but I think what we did. So, you got to understand let me just in 30 seconds give you 9 years worth of what we did. When I came to Jefferson, we were a 2-hospital system that was certainly a stepchild to Penn. There were 3 people in my position. There was a president of Thomas Jefferson University, which was a 2,800 person health science university, student health science university. There was Thomas Jefferson University Hospital, Methodist Hospital with a CEO, and there was Jefferson Health System, which was this partnership with Mainline Health with the CEO. 3 different boards. They spent a lot of time fighting each other. And financially, Jefferson was not in great shape. Fast forward, by the time I left in 2022, we were an 18-hospital system, a 2-campus university, bringing together design and healthcare, design the human experience in healthcare, with almost 10,000 students, and a Medicaid and Medicare Advantage insurance company, so a $9.5 billion company. So with about 35,000 employees. So how'd that happen? Well, the first thing that happened is, I got there and my aha moment, I'd been an advisor to Apple in like the year 2000, 2001. And I did not keep my options. I think I bought a stereo or something in 2004, but that's another story. But the genius of Apple at that time was Steve Jobs saying, I don't want to spend the next 10 years going from 4% to 8% of a commoditized market, which is what he called computers and operating systems. Now, everybody said he was either crazy or on drugs because that was their entire revenue. He actually was crazy. He wasn't on drugs, right? So when I got to Jefferson, I shamelessly stole that in 2013. And I talked about the old math being inpatient revenue, outpatient revenue, in-person tuition, NIH funding. And the new math being, innovation, strategic partnerships with digital companies and Silicon Valley. And, I got the same reaction, that's nuts. So I first went and said, all right, tell me something, faculty. My first faculty meeting, I've been there like 3 weeks. Tell me something that will get somebody really excited, want to give us $100 million. And somebody raised their hand and said, well, we're number 2 to Penn, but we're better than Temple and Drexel. I said, well, that's the opposite of exciting. And I have no idea if any of that's true. And the second person raised their hand and said, well, if you give us money for protein beam therapy and more money for NIH funding, we can get closer to Penn in NIH funding, U.S. News and World Report. Now, if you're listening to this on audio, this might not make sense to you, but I said at that time, if that's how you want me to define my presidency, getting closer to Penn by those parameters, it'd be like if the search committee said the 2 most important things are height and hair, I probably would not have applied for the shot. Now, for those of you who don't have the benefit of seeing me, I am 5'7" and hair challenged. So the point is that I said, how about if we take a totally different approach and become healthcare at any address? That Jefferson gets defined not by where the sick people go, which we still do a great job of, but those 97% of people at home that they say we're partners with Jefferson, so that when, God forbid, they get pancreatic cancer, they're not going up and down the expressway to see which one of us has the coolest billboard because they're part of our team. That was immensely successful in 2 ways. It differentiated us. We changed our mission because every mission in Philadelphia of academic medical centers was to be the premier academic medical center in Philadelphia. Nobody cares about that other than you and your mother. So we changed ours to We Improve Lives. We changed our vision to reimagining healthcare education and discovery to create unparalleled value. By the way, back in 2014, when we did that, none of the top 100 academic medical centers had reimagine or value in their vision. And we basically did 3 values that really helped us during the pandemic. Put people first, do the right thing, and be bold and think different. And what was funny, James, is I would meet with chairs and people under me, and I'd have to go through the values first. What are you doing to put people first? And they were really prepared for that. What are you doing to do the right thing? Really prepare for that. And they go, okay, now what are you doing to be bold and think different? And they go, were you serious about that one? So so then I starting with that and putting that into incentives. So what did it do? It obviously we grew. We not only grew $7 billion with governance as currency, but we did it and maintained an A rating, which is almost unheard of because usually, and we did it without writing a check because we did it with governance as currency. On the academic side, back in 2016, when we did a merger, think about this, a 197-year-old health science university with the number 3 fashion design university. That was like, Middle States was like, are you nuts? Like we heard this guy was crazy, but this is really ridiculous. By the time we got accredited, because we did a really good job of putting them together and starting to talk about design of the human experience, and the health of artists and all that, they were using us as an example to the point where Chronicle of Higher Education said of all the mergers contemplated, this was in September of 2020 or so. But what's happened is it started a flood of almost like what's happening in healthcare, where folks are contemplating mergers, even in Philadelphia. Drexel and Salus University have gotten together or are getting together and merging, St. Joseph's University and University of Sciences. So I think that was a real success of sort of predicting the future, and it did very well for us. We have almost 10,000 students. And then the third thing we did is this whole concept of healthcare at any address and being a 197-year-old academic medical center, thinking like a startup company, opened up all these doors with the venture capital folks in the world, because, basically the average amount of time, just to get something done in a health system was like 12 to 18 months. And we were frankly more nimble, flexible, and agile. It was painful because, that's not how the system acted, but we really were able to do that to the point where, again, when I left Jefferson, we had some partnerships with Silicon Valley that were really diversifying our portfolio in a meaningful way. So the whole concept of portfolio diversification through innovation, through philanthropy, we went from $25 million a year of philanthropy to almost $200 million a year in philanthropy. We got a $110 million gift to name our medical school. We got a $75 million gift from Bernie Marcus, the founder of Home Depot, around integrative health, because very few academic medical centers would look at a global health thing where, acupuncture was just as important as surgery. So we really start to become the place that had both a great traditional reputation, but was also doing really neat things. And I left, as I said, I left the place with an insurance company, with 18 hospitals, with a 2-campus university, and an A rating that have brought in some of the best and most innovative doctors and nurses in the country.
That is any one of those things is phenomenal. That you did all of those things is like it's just extraordinary, and it's sort of miraculous. Now, and I think one of the best compliments I got when I left Jefferson was from the CEO of PenMed, Kevin Mahoney, and he said, Steve was the best thing that ever happened to us. I'm paraphrasing a little bit because it woke us up. In the past there was Penn and everybody else before Kevin got there, and when we became, in 2013. I hyperbolically said, now we were a 2-hospital cute and cuddly system about a 10th the size of Penn. And I said, we will be the largest health system in Philadelphia, in the Philadelphia Business Journal. And in 2021, we became the largest health system in Philadelphia. That is amazing. So I run nonprofits, as you know, much smaller, mind you, but what was sort of the secret, or not, or some something that really helped you on your way? Because what you did again was really, 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 really difficult. I mean, were there some things you can point to, some
Yeah,
approaches?
yeah. I think I think there were three things. One is, you know, I was playing with house money. You know, every once in a while I like to gamble, right? And I like to play craps, and it's really, really nice. You know, there's that old adage: when you're winning, you're winning. Or when you're hot. Because when you're playing with house money, you'll do some things, instinctively that you might not do. So the reason I'm saying I was playing with house money, I started my career. I started my residency. I did my residency in a 2 resident a year community program. The chance of my being a clinical instructor at Jefferson, which is a sort of conservative academic entity, let alone their president and CEO, was 0.0%. In fact, at one point, one of the chairs I was walking in, one of the chairs was talking to a student. This is when I was, when I was president and CEO. I was telling the student, look, you're really, really good. You have a great career ahead of you. You can't take a residency in this community program because you'll never have an academic career. And I happened to hear this, and I got in and said, look, I just happened to overhear this. And this chair, Dr. X, is really, really smart. You should listen to him about 90% of the time. I just want you to know, I did my residency in Allentown Hospital, and I'm now his boss. So that's not always true. So I think on the one hand, everybody I know is still delivering babies in Allentown. So in each of my jobs, if I ended there, I would have so overperformed as far as a career in at least in that world, so that I took some chances, frankly, that other folks wouldn't. I also took some chances because I knew I'd be creative. Almost every job I took, including Jefferson, smart people told me not to take for different reasons. I mean, I took over as a CEO of the practice group and eventually dean at Drexel University College of Medicine when Allegheny went bankrupt and the practice group was losing $100 million a year. And the only reason I got that job is because literally nobody wanted it. I took over the job as the dean and then CEO of University of South Florida Health, which isn't even in South Florida. It's in North Central West Florida in Tampa. And it was basically, here's the primordial ooze. We're in the shadow of University of Florida. We're a state institution. We read your book, make it cool. And we built the largest simulation center in the country because, again, I'm a pilot, and every 2 years I have to get my technical competence assessed. Nobody's ever checked my surgical competence. So I just made this statement: you're a hell of a lot safer flying with me in Tampa than being operated by me in Tampa by objective criteria. And we created this $35 million, at that time, largest simulation center in the country. We created the first medical school in the country with a hospital 1,100 miles away, where we chose students based on science, GPA, based on self-awareness, empathy, communication skills, and cultural competence, because we recognized that there'd be iPhones that would memorize the Krebs cycle better than we were, and a lot of doctors weren't self-aware and empathetic. It quadrupled diversity. We became the nidus to start the Villages Health, which is now 200,000 seniors that own their own health plan with an MLR 60 and a risk-adjusted factor 1.6. So we did all these things that most universities don't do. And then on the Jefferson side, when I unlikely got asked to, or won the search for that, it wasn't that anybody thought Jefferson wasn't a great place. It's just that the average longevity of presidents and CEOs there had been, like 3 years. And they just didn't have a plan that could get them to compete with Penn. So each one of those things was difficult. So I think one was playing with house money. The second is, one of my Wharton professors used to say, you should always have 5 people under you that think they can do a better job than you, and 3 that are right. And I think one of the problems with healthcare leaders, and if any of you are out there listening to this, you should look in the mirror and think about this. We tend to hire people that are like us, that we can relate to. We don't hire people that are much better at us what we're bad at, because we have this sort of weird thing that, if I hire someone that's much better at me on the academic side or the operations side, then, my board will look and say, well, maybe they'd be better. I looked and say, look, I'm the only person that got through 2 years of Wharton. I hope none of my professors are listening, without ever opening Excel. My Wharton thesis was on the difference in management styles between Captain Kirk in the first Star Trek and Captain Picard in the second Star Trek. I remember the dean calling me in and telling me what other folks were doing, which was like hyperinflation in Argentina and options trading. And, I knew what I was good at. I'm really good at vision. I'm really good at, creativity. I'm really good at connecting with employees. I'm not good at necessarily the day-to-day thing of running hospitals. I'm not good at, and I didn't have the credentials to be the typical provost. I was each of those things in former lives, but that wasn't my real skill set. So I got the best person I could, to really be a great operator for our health system. I remember one of the board members said, yes, Steve, we really like this guy, but he's not very creative. I said, with me, you've got creativity up your neck, right? Like that's fine. He's really good at this and this. I got a provost that at that time had been the chair of pathology at Penn, and then came over. So I started to get those people that could really do those things, so I could go out and do the things that I like to do. And the third secret for me was really what my new book is about, but using music and other means to really relate on an even level with our employees. I would go every Tuesday. There's a hot dog stand right outside of our main hospital on 10th and Walnut. And on Tuesday afternoons around noon, I would go out and hang out in the hot dog stand, because like that's where people hung out, right? And or had lunch. And they would do selfies, but I would just sort of just be one of the people. And we'd talk music because they knew I was a DJ. So they're not saying President Klasko. And we'd argue about music sometimes because they're on an even playing field. But they'd also tell me what they were happy about and angry about. So we changed our benefits. And I go to my cabinet, and the benefits we had changed really hurt some of the people making, $17 an hour, $20 an hour. So, and they told me that. So go to the cabinet and go to my head of HR and say, so how do people like our new benefits? Oh, they love it. I said, no, they don't. He goes, oh, no, they love it. After about the fifth, I said, okay, let's do this like playing poker. You tell me how you know that they love it. I'll tell you how we know they don't. We'll see who wins the hand. He goes, I said, so he said, oh, I know they love it because I talked to my VP of benefits and he said they love it. Okay. That's like an ace high or 2 threes. Let me give you my 4 aces. I talked to the people in the hot dog stand and they were almost crying. So we're going to change that. So the point I'm trying to make is it wasn't just me going out once a month in my suit and saying and hitting the floors on a Sunday morning so that I went to the hospital. I really hung out with folks and listened to what they were. And because of the music thing and a little bit because of my personality, they were willing to talk to me at least in those situations in a very different level. So to me, those are the 3 things that I think allowed me to be a little bit more creative and frankly, have our team do what some people call the miracle on ice in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and still amazing, still incredible. Now you mentioned some things, and let's talk about sort of industry challenges. First, we can talk to health sector, right? You mentioned empathy, which is really forward looking, right? We know that bedside manner is not very, very good these days. And we just saw some news item where ChatGPT is more effective apparently, or rated better. So talk to us about health going forward and those challenges and opportunities and give us some sort of peek into the future.
Yeah. So look, I mean, I'll give you sort of a few that are top of mind across all my worlds. But the first is getting back to the point that you made. Like, it's just asinine that we still, by and large, choose doctors based on the same criteria we did before. I mean, it used to be, literally, can you memorize the Krebs cycle? Now, that made sense in the 70s when I was going to medical school, because I could memorize 19 reasons somebody had jaundice and you could only memorize 15. You were going to miss some stuff, okay? Now it's just ridiculous, right? Because my iPhone is going to do better. And as you said, ChatGPT will be all over us. So why does that even matter? So when you think about it, we select every physician in this country, assuming they're going to be a physician scientist at Yale. Okay, and we need some physician scientists at Yale. So what we did is say, look, and we start to look at segmenting our admissions. So we need some of those folks, which should be based on, 4.0s in science and MedCats and that kind of thing. But then we need folks that are going to become family docs. And by the way, part of the whole diversity problem is that there are people in Philadelphia that pay $100,000 for little Johnny or little Mary to have 5 Princeton reviews and 3 tutors so they can memorize the Krebs cycle and do the MedCats well. And there's another kid with a battered Barron's book. What we found in our what we call select program at University of South Florida, where we choose 56 students a year based on self-awareness, empathy, communication skills, and cultural competence, is that we quadruple diversity because we were choosing people to be good doctors for the future. So I think this whole issue of as offline meets online, what's the role of the human in the middle and how does that change? It took us 50 years to get doctors and nurses to work together. Now we're going to have to get doctors and robots to work together. So I want to start a center for intersentient education, get like doctors and robots, talking to each other and start that process. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is we've missed one really important tenet in healthcare. And that's, I think Pierre Diamandis said this, but disruption by definition threatens your existing product line, right? So, breakthrough products are going to make your previous investments, less worth it. And that's true in just about everything that happened, right? If you think about Amazon disrupting the retail industry, there were 3 reactions. Some people said, oh my God, nobody's ever going to a store again. Think Circuit City went all the way and couldn't make it. Sears and Penny said, what a stupid fad. Everybody loves the day after Thanksgiving, parking 10 miles away and fighting over Cabbage Patch dolls. And they're Sears and Pennies, or used to be Sears and Pennies. Target and Walmart said, hey, we're damn good at what we do, but we're going to have to be just as good as they are at what they do. And they're Target and Walmart. That's what I think health systems need to take on. Be Target and Walmart. Somebody has pancreatic cancer. We had the best pancreatic cancer surgeon in the nation at Jefferson. They couldn't care what our digital strategy is, how good our food was, or they wanted to see Dr. Yo. But for all those other people, especially as people get younger, they want healthcare to be like everything else. And then I guess the third really important thing is we have to come to terms that we have failed. And let me say that again, failed, underline, as a combined healthcare system. The government has failed, the private sector has failed. If you want to get angry about healthcare, James, just get really angry. In Philadelphia, the home of Comcast, there's like 5 zip codes with less than 50% broadband. Think about what happened in August of 2020, right, with the pandemic. People were watching CNN and they were saying, don't go to the hospitals unless you really have to, because you're going to get this pandemic, blah, blah, blah. And let's say I'm in one of those zip codes and, my husband or my wife is having chest pain and they don't have access to Jeff Connect or Penn Connect or whatever. And you say, I don't know what I should do. Well, it says we should hold off going to the hospital unless we don't have to. Honey, why don't you go to sleep and we'll see what happens. That person died. And there's a lot of that in the underserved areas. So that's bad enough. But what's disgusting, or whatever word that you can use on a podcast, is that, and they didn't do anything wrong, it's a systems problem, but the insurers, especially the for-profit insurers, but even some of the blues, when they had their earnings calls or net operating income, we had record profits in our Medicaid sector because we had actuarialized that these people would get care and they didn't get care. So it was boon times. Now there's no place in the world where that makes sense. And it means something, right? In my specialty of obstetrics, we spend 4 times more per obstetric patient than any civilized country. And our outcomes are getting worse. We're like number 50 in outcomes. Maternal morbidity and mortality is going down. We have more NICU admissions than just about everybody else. Again, it's mostly in the underserved community. And it's because there's 100 reasons. But it's because, things like malpractice insurance. This company I was on the board of that's doing remote obstetric monitoring. It hasn't really made in this country because everybody's afraid that the first kid that gets remote obstetric monitored at home, 15 years from now, when a kid didn't get into Princeton, there'll be, those law firm commercials, Schwartz and O'Reilly, is your kid a slacker? Did he get remote obstetric monitored? Call Schwartz and O'Reilly, and you won't have to pay. It's not the only problem, but it's the fact that the way health systems get paid is that people come to the health system. By and large, we still haven't really understood. It's that pharma continues to. We're one of only 2 countries in the world, James, that allow direct-to-consumer advertising. And I'm old enough to know, and the other one is New Zealand, but they limit it. I'm old enough to remember when it started. It was all right. It was all things like ibuprofen or Viagra and the 4-hour erections and that kind of thing. Now, I'm not sure if people think about this, but if you watch Morning Joe or CNN or Fox and Friends in the morning, most of the commercials are, do you have stage 4 lung cancer? Ask your doctor about blank. And they show some guy ripping off his oxygen and frolicking in the weeds. Do any of you ever wonder why that would be a commercial? I mean, because thank God there's not like everybody's, not like you go to the restaurant, every other person has stage 4 lung cancer. It's because that drug's like a couple $100,000, and it only works on like 10% of the people. But what it does is it pressures, and I heard this from my docs, it sort of puts pressure on us. See, we want to do the right thing. We don't just want to give somebody a drug, but it puts pressure on us. I can just spend an hour not getting paid, and explaining why we're not doing it. It's not that we don't, we don't care about them, or I can just give it to them. And that's why they do it, because there's an ROI to it. So we don't care. I mean, we just don't care. And, we have pandered to every lobbying thing, and there's nobody pure in this. American Hospital Association, American Health Insurance Plans, the American Medical Association, obviously the pharma lobby, which is the largest lobby in healthcare, the PBM lobby. I mean, why do PBMs even exist? Why add what other sector that says we want to make things more efficient has continued to add layers where people are making billions of dollars? The last thing I'll tell you, and this will keep you up at night, but 45 years ago, one of my mentors wrote a book called Medicine's Dilemmas: Infinite Needs, Finite Resources. And he talked about the iron triangle of access, quality, and cost. He said, if you increase one angle, you got to decrease another. So if you're going to increase access, you're either going to increase cost or decrease quality. He said, unless you're willing to disrupt the system, and disruption is painful. Right? And he said, if anybody ever tells you, this is like 45 years ago, that they're going to increase access, increase quality, and decrease cost, it's not going to be painful to somebody, they're lying. So if you think about the last 16 years of health policy, President Obama, the day after ACA, said, good news, the ACA will increase access, increase quality, and decrease cost, and it won't be painful to anybody. Well, that had to be a lie. It might have been inadvertent, but it wasn't true. I think President Trump said, mine will be fantastic, terrific, unbelievable, and really huge, and it was none of the four. So the problem is nobody, including this president, has been willing to have the political will to do what everybody knows needs to get done, because it's going to hurt somebody. And it's not just Medicare for all, but United. Why would United stock be the best stock to have gotten after the ACA if the goal was to decrease? That just makes no sense. Other than Apple, that was the best stock you could have bought. Why did all the supply chain stocks balloon like pharma and others? Why did PBM stocks balloon? So how can all those things balloon? For-profit hospital stocks, some of the best stocks. How can all those things balloon and provide more efficient care? They can't.
And so, if you could wave a magic wand, what would that look like? What would the future look like to help sort of save our healthcare system? Right? Yeah. I mean, it's become so expensive, and
My proposal, James, would be, and I include this in one of my books. In my book that I just published, I talk about the Maryland system, which is worth looking at. I have a whole chapter on it. It's not perfect, but it's a great experiment, and it rewards people for more efficient, for more efficient care across the sector, at least for anything that's getting paid for by the government. So what if I could wave a magic wand and I ruled the world? I would do a single payer by state, because there's no magic wand. It's easy for Bernie Sanders to give 3 words, say Medicare for all, and yeah, that's great. That would work. But if you did single payer by state over 10 years, what would happen is we'd have 50 experiments. We wouldn't have 50. We'd have, probably 10. But, you could have Vermont and California and, maybe a couple of say, we want the federal government and the state government to run healthcare. So we'd see how that works. If you take like the state I came from, Pennsylvania, we had, Highmark and IBC on the blue side, and we had just about it's pretty much what I did for my self-insured plan, right? We had sort of been tied to one insurer forever because of politically. And I did the first RFP for our 35,000 employees and mainline health 10,000 employees. So 50,000 people and their families. It was like a city. And we had 7 entities apply for it. It was based on, cost, access, quality, and user experience. And it was only a 3-year contract. So they had to, and it created huge waves. And I don't want to get into it because it got pretty ugly with the one that we didn't go with that we had used before. But imagine if you did that by state and you picked 1 or 2, well, pretty much what employers do. And you said, all right, if it's Pennsylvania, we picked Highmark and United. And they have to hit these bars. And if they don't, this is what they said they do. If they don't, we'll do another RFP in 3 years. Florida might pick, Florida Blue, and I think that under that system, you'd start to see some creativity. You'd see some hospitals fail, which would be really good, and you'd see some, and you'd see some insurers fail, which would be really good. And in order to achieve their goals, they'd have to make deals with suppliers like pharma and that kind of thing, which would be really good. So, I mean, it'd be politically challenging. Where I get excited is, one of my friends and colleagues, I think he's one of the best CEOs in the country, Jae-Won Ryu, who's CEO of Geisinger, just announced this deal with Kaiser. He reminded me that I talked about Geisinger 5 years or so ago, on this thing called Horizon Health. But the concept will be, everybody talks about Kaiser as a payer provider and Geisinger as a payer provider. And they said, yeah, but that's California and, central Pennsylvania. But now, theoretically, 14 or 15 hospitals, assuming it gets past the regulators, will be able to join that and be acquired by Horizon and get all the benefits of that. So I think you're starting to see some of these experiments happen for the right reasons. If you take a Kaiser or a Geisinger, because they're payer providers, and I'll give you an example, even at Jefferson, we acquired a Medicaid and Medicare Advantage health plan. Changes everything, right? Because we're now at the first dollar premium. So the difference between a patient with, and this is a true story, with asthma exacerbations that had come in 19 times to our emergency room in 6 months, and we took care of and probably got paid by Medicaid. When we brought the community health worker, she has mold in her house. So now it makes sense for me to hire handyman or handywoman to take care of the mold because I'm paying for it. It's so the areas where currently there's payer provider alignment, which are great experiments and learning labs, are in self-insured, TPAs for health systems because they tend to be the largest employers, right? So for my 35,000 employees, I was the payer provider and employer. I wanted them to be well. I wanted them to get back to work, and I frankly wanted to keep them out of the hospital because I'm paying less. And for these Medicare Advantage things, we sold half of our ACO to Humana to create a Medicare Advantage product. And certainly these payer providers like Geisinger, Kaiser, UPMC, Intermountain, and others. So I think that's where you're going to start to see the innovation happen and the changes happen.
Right. Well, let's be hopeful. That seems really novel. So you mentioned your book, your new book. Tell us what you talk about in that, and tell us a bit more about your DJing, which I find super fascinating.
So I actually started my career as a DJ. That's what I wanted to be. I got fired from my first job, and I won't go through exactly why, but and I went back to Lehigh University where I was a student, and they said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I want to be a DJ. Well, it's clearly not going to happen. You just got fired from your first job, but you've taken enough chemistry courses so you could apply to medical school. And so why would I want to do that? And I said, well, because again, you're not going to be a DJ and you probably need a job. I said, good point. So I became a doctor. As I said, I became a private practice doctor, but everything in my life has been around music. It's what I spend a lot of time thinking about doing. And in almost every situation where it was talks or whatever, I would tie it to music. Even when we got $110 million to name our medical school, Philly International Records, I had Gamble and Huff, who were the writers for most of this Teddy Pendergrass, OJ's type folks. Because I wanted to be the heart and soul of Philadelphia. I wanted to take that, because, as Huey Lewis in the news said, rock and roll starts in Cleveland. It doesn't, despite the Hall of Fame being there. It doesn't start in Detroit. It really starts in Philadelphia. So I wanted to take that model, and so everything I did was that. And Wharton wrote a thing about this, but the thing that we had the largest COVID load of any system in Philadelphia, and probably, and I'm very proud of the fact we're one of the few places that didn't lay off or furlough anybody. But what happened is every Friday, and I started this before the pandemic, but it really played well during the pandemic. We had the trifecta of the pandemic, the financial tsunami, and the George Floyd systemic racism realizations, all of which, were centered in many ways in Philly. And I was dealing with a very diverse and in some respects angry employee base for all those reasons, for good reasons. So I did a Friday playlist every Friday. And as we started to get into this, I would start to get into some of the George Floyd issues. And I remember one of the songs we used, for example, was Choice of Colors by Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. If you had your choice of colors, which one would you choose, my brother? If there was no day or night, which would you prefer to be right? And what happened is I would get hundreds of emails back about different songs. And what was magical about that is it wasn't President Klasko, because I was on an even playing field with those people when it came from music. So Choice of Colors one was interesting because they said, well, President Klasko, it's great, we're angry, and it's great that you included that song, but I know the flip side of that song, which was a much more aggressive song, and you probably won't put that. Or there was a Gil Scott-Heron song, called "Whitey on the Moon," which in 1970, which was, while you guys are put people on the moon, we're suffering here, So I put both of those out, and it really started a dialogue. But I wasn't President Klasko, and the beautiful thing about music is it unites us. Right. And it unites us in a non-hierarchical way. So the book is called Feeling All Right, How the Message in Music Can Make Healthcare Healthier. It's published by Health Administration Press, which is the publishing arm of the American College of Healthcare Executives. It's a fun and serious book. Like most of my books are science fiction books, like 2035, and the United States got admitted to the Intergalactic Council of Health. So you don't need any footnotes because nobody can tell me what the Intergalactic Council of Cool Health Systems said in 2034. But this is real, and has some solutions. So lots of footnotes. I had somebody helping me with that. The person that helps me with all my books, Michael Hode, and another individual named Ken Turry. But what's cool about it uses 50 songs to basically define where healthcare needs to go. So the first chapter is called Courage to Change by Sia, where we're all way too risk averse. Second chapter is called Keep the Customer Satisfied by Simon and Garfunkel, for obvious reasons. That was a great song. I've been slandered. I've been libeled. I've heard words I never heard in the Bible, but I got to keep the customer satisfied. It's about things like consumer segmentation. There's all sorts of songs around health equity. And it's got a playlist index, and the index is based on the songs. It runs from songs from the 50s to the 2020s, it's fun. And we were going to call it "Staying Alive," but one of the lawyers felt that the last remaining BG might sue us, so we called it "Feeling All Right," which I think we probably would have been okay. But anyhow, yeah, so that's the concept. Basically, that everything I learned about being a healthcare leader for 40 years, I learned from being a DJ for 50 years. And I still DJ, and I have some pictures of me DJing with a good trouble shirt and that kind of thing in the book. And the one thing I'll tell you, James, that forever, 100 years from now, this will be the only book. It actually has 3 followers. One's by a friend, Dave Johnson, who's this amazing journalist. But the other 2 are by John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple, and still one of the leaders in entrepreneurial technology and sensors. And Jerry Blavat, the geeter with the heater, the boss with the hot sauce, one of the DJ leaders in the country, one of the founders of American Bandstand. So he passed away. In fact, there's a Rock and Roll Heaven thing in the book about him. But it will be the only book in the next 500 years that has, one of the top DJs in the country, started American Bandstand, and the CEO of Apple probably writing a foreword for the same book. So that's where I think it'll be differentiated.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. I've ordered it and listening to the music, frankly. So that's
We
really
have a
cool.
Spotify playlist, a public Spotify playlist. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I'll put a link to it then in the show notes.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
that's great.
yeah, good. Michael will get everybody that.
Yeah, that'd be great. So this has been a great conversation, Steve. Thanks for sharing these insights. Usually we share just one thing, um, that you want to opine on. So tell us, when you look back 10 or 15 years from now, what will you tell your grandkids?
Yeah, so my five grandchildren, they call me Nini. And I just gave a thing at JP Morgan Nashville with an executive from Amazon and LikePoint, and I asked myself that question. I said, 15 years from now, what's Evan, my oldest grandkid, going to say? Is it true, Nini, that in 2023 blank? And I think the thing I'm working on that I think is most like that, because if you think about, our generation, is it true that like if you want to make a long distance call, you have to pay like $100 and wait for, um, um, is around transplantation. There's 100,000 people in this country waiting for transplants, about 1,000 in lung, about 15,000 in liver, and about 85,000 or so in kidney. And people die, and think about all the things on dialysis, et cetera, during the time that they're waiting. So I'm leading an advisory board with a former head of HHS, former head of the VA, an executive advisor, former CEO of Cleveland Clinic, Toby Cosgrove, one of the top people in 3D printing design, that is 3D bioprinting organs, 3D bioprinting vascularized organs. It's led by two companies, 3D Systems, which is it's DDD on Stock Exchange, one of the largest 3D printing companies in the world, and United Therapeutics. United Therapeutics was started by Martine Rothblatt. When she was Martin Rothblatt, he was the founder and CEO of SiriusXM, and looked into transplantation and became the CEO of United Therapeutics. And they've invested lots and lots of money. Long story short, she did a thing, if you want to look on CNN, called Life Itself. 5 years from now, we believe we will have a totally vascularized, cellularized, bioprinted lung for transplant. We will actually have one in a pig, I believe, this year. And then we are moving to liver and kidneys. We already have a bioprinted breast. So if you think about people after breast cancer, my wife had breast cancer. Her surgery went well, but she's on her third reconstruction because we still use 90s products like silicone and saline. You would actually be able to bioprint breast. Now, there are regulatory issues because, you have to go to the FDA with each breast theoretically because they're all unique. So I think 15 years from now, they'll say, Nini, is it true that in your time in 2023 that if you needed a kidney, somebody like actually had to take out their kidney? That seems like really barbaric. Yes, grandson or granddaughter, that was true. We were really barbaric. It was the bloodletting stage of transplantation and leeches in 2023. But it's much better now because we kept your umbilical cord stem cells from when you were born. And I hope you never need a transplant, but if you do, insurance covers it. We just go to, this company's called Systemic Bio, and they will make you an organ, and the GPT robot will insert it for you. So that's what I think we're heading for.
That's exciting, really hopeful and exciting. One more. What's one tip you would give young people on how they can leverage music and the arts for career success?
Yeah, so I think the answer is creativity. When I graduated from Wharton, we got a large grant to look at what makes doctors different than normal people or other people, depending on the audience. And what we found is that the ability to take chances and be creative is really the key. We found that doctors often are autonomous, competitive, hierarchical, and they're creative. But if we ask them what got them to where they are, it's strategy, focus, and discipline. So the advice I'd give is, the beautiful thing about music, I give you the advice that Berry Gordy did not give Marvin Gaye. So Marvin Gaye was the Frank Sinatra, for most of you founders that are listening, this are going to be younger. He was the Frank Sinatra of Motown, right? He was, just singing all these crooning songs, and that's what they wanted him to be. They had just done that with his Dreams and Temptations, going to Copacabana and that kind of thing. And he goes out there and does What's Going On, Mercy, Mercy Me, the Ecology, which is about climate change. What's Going On was about inequities and sexual healing, which, as you can imagine what that was about. And Berry Gordy went nuts. These are never going to sell. Motown, is the sanitized version of, well, What's Going On was the #1 album, Rolling Stone, in history, and so on and so forth. And that started the whole, for lack of a better word, more edgy soul and R&B music. Because in the past, soul and R&B music had been taken over by Caucasian people, that would take the same song and get it further up Billboard, but they couldn't replicate this because it was basically the shared experience. So what does that mean? It means think about what's important to you or what you want to solve, and don't let anybody tell you, the right way to do it. The last thing I'll tell you, and this was a funny story, I gave the senior thesis talk for South by in Austin to an audience of like 629-year-olds. So I first got out there and said, well, this is like Hair Club for Men. Not only do I know something about this topic, but I'm the only person here in this room in the club. But one of the first questions was, Dr. Klasko, why do you think it is that, if there's going to be $14 trillion spent on the aging and graying of the population, we haven't done more for that? There's only about 4% of new digital companies or that. I said, because you guys are all 29 years old and you're thinking about what you want. You want a robot that will deliver your pizza hotter and quicker. So if you go to CES, there's 100 robots delivering your pizza hotter and quicker. You're not thinking about your 91-year-old grandmother and the caregiver and how you get that caregiver back to employment with the robot. But that's where the money's going to be. So if you think about, solving a real problem that exists, as opposed to what you and your roommate think would be nice for you, I think that's going to be the secret.
That's great. That's really great. This has been a great conversation, Steve. Thank you so much for spending your time, and I look forward to hearing you DJ one of these days, number one, and again, seeing what path you take in the next few years and what innovations you help oversee and inspire.
Well, thanks, Jim. This is a great venue, and you have a really diverse audience. I hope in any of these, you hope that one or two things hit with some people. Yeah, the last thing I'll just say, the thing that's the most gratifying for me, I was kidding around with you that, if you're 69-year-old and vertical, like you get to know a lot of people, is the people that I've never met that in mostly, reasonably young folks that say either, I heard you, talk about being bold and I decided to do it. I left my job and now I'm running this company, or, I've always been, I have a lot of faults, but one of the things is a young person calls my assistant and says, I'd like to talk to Dr. Klasko. I talked to just about all of them. And, there's one that just told me about the company he started, and, it started with the conversation that we did. So to me, that's, what I want, frankly, when I'm down and you have a headstone, is that, well, I didn't do much, the people that I might have influenced just a little bit have done some great things for this, for health and academics. And I think that'll be true.
That's great. That's so thoughtful. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like it, leave a review, and subscribe. See you soon.